Garrett hadn't opened his door for anyone in 3 years. Not since the war ended. Not since he'd stepped away from everything he once trusted. His small apartment clung to the rim of Station Helios, where steel hallways touched the endless dark outside. Most people had moved closer to the inner rings where the lights shone warmer and the air didn't taste like recycled dread. But Garrett stayed. The quiet fit him. The isolation felt like something he'd earned. So when the knocking began at his door that morning, his first thought was to ignore it. The next knock was softer, almost unsure. The third never came. Garrett stood in his narrow kitchen, coffee cooling between his hands, listening. The silence that followed felt wrong somehow. Heavy, like the seconds before a ship's hull splits, pressing against every instinct that had kept him alive for 54 years. He moved toward the door. The woman collapsed at his entryway was a human. Her skin held the deep violet of a Carathian dusk, and her ears rose in delicate points through long dark hair, blood bright and stark against purple pooled beneath her. Her armor was elite military grade, the kind you didn't buy, only earned or stolen. Her eyes lifted as he knelt beside her. They were the shade of Earth's ocean, a planet Garrett had only seen in pictures, stunning and painfully far away. "I'm sorry," she breathed. Everywhere else was closed. Something in the way she said it made Garrett laugh. A short, quiet sound he hadn't made in years. Here stood someone who likely ended more lives than he'd ever met, apologizing for bleeding on his floor. "Can you walk?" he asked. "I could fly if I had to," she murmured. Then her eyes drifted shut again. Garrett had 12 minutes before station security circled back on their patrol. He took 11 of them to pull her inside. Her name was Lissa. He learned that 3 hours later when she woke on his couch, medical foam closing the plasma scorch along her ribs. "You didn't call security," she said. "Not a question, just fact." "I didn't." Garrett offered her water. Seemed rude after. "You picked my door to die at." "I wasn't dying." She sipped slowly. "I was regrouping. That's what we called it. In my day, too." Her eyes met his then, truly seeing him, reading the years traced around his eyes, the silver threaded through his beard, the posture of a man who'd learned to carry old burdens. "You were coalition," she said before the fracture. "I was a lot of things before a lot of things." Lissa eased herself upright, testing her limits with slow care. "You know what I am, what I've done. I can guess. Then, you know they'll come searching." Garrett topped off his coffee, moving with the calm of someone long past panic. They usually do. One thing age had taught him was that fear didn't fade. It changed shape. When you're young, you fear dying. When you've lived long enough, you fear never having lived at all. He'd spent 3 years in this place, breathing filtered air, watching ships drift past his window. Safe, quiet, alone. Somewhere along the way, safe had started to feel like fading away. "Why my door?" he asked. Lissa lowered her gaze to her hands. They were elegant, steady even now, hands that had likely held more weapons than most soldiers saw in a lifetime. "I scanned the corridor. Every unit. Checked heat signatures, security grids, risk profiles." She let the thought settle. Yours was the only one that felt like someone might understand. Understand what? Being tired. The word hung between them like a shadow with its own gravity. Garrett knew that kind of tired. It lived in his bones, in mornings where getting up felt like a question with no answer. "How old are you?" he asked. 32. Standard. Young for my people. Her eyes met his. Old, for my profession. Garrett nodded. I was 47 when I walked away. Thought I was ancient.
Now,
I think I was just a kid pretending to be a soldier. Do you regret it getting
out.
He actually thought about it.
I
Regret that it took me so long to see. That purpose isn't the same as violence. He set his cup down. I regret the faces I forget and the ones I can't erase. Lissa touched the sealed burn along her ribs. They trained us not to remember. Said memories made us sloppy. They always say things like that, he murmured. Helps them sleep. Do you sleep? Garrett smiled, a careful, testing smile like taking an old tool out of a box to see if it still worked, getting better at it. She stayed 2 days while the wound knitted.
Garrett
Learned she was hunting the man who killed her sister. Learned she'd been one of the galaxy's most feared assassins for a decade. Learned she drank her coffee black, laughed at old war comedies, and sometimes jolted awake from dreams she refused to explain.
on
The third morning she was ready.
the
Man you're after, Garrett said.
what?
Then, Lissa adjusted her armor, now fully repaired, worth more than his entire life's belongings. I don't think about after. Maybe you should.
She
Turned and for a breath all the lethal sharpness dropped away. She looked young, far younger than 32. Younger than he'd been the day he quit the war. I don't know how to be anything else, she whispered. Garrett walked to the window. A transport ship was docking, bringing people who still had places to
go.
He'd watched hundreds of them come and go. Never once imagined stepping on
One,
3 years ago, I felt the same, he said. Figured I'd stay here until I just stopped. He looked at her. Then, today happened. You happened. Lissa stood beside him, watching the ships. Lights wink in the hangar. If I finish this and return, would that door still open? I don't know, Garrett answered. Honestly, but I think I'd like to find out. She left the way she arrived. Swift, quiet, dangerous. But before she slipped into the hall, she paused. Garrett. Yeah. Thank you for not closing your door. Thank you for knocking. Garrett stepped back into his apartment. But the silence felt different now, less like a closing chapter, more like the pause between breaths where anything could begin.
He
poured new coffee and settled by the window. Outside, the galaxy turned. Somewhere in that enormous dark, a woman named Lissa was seeking justice or vengeance or maybe just a reason to keep moving. And here on Station Helios, in a small room on the edge of everything, Garrett wondered if he might stop merely watching ships leave. Maybe one day he'd board one. After all, his door had opened once. It could open again. Sometimes the galaxy's deadliest assassin is exactly the reminder you need that living isn't just breathing. It's being brave enough to let someone
in.
Brave enough to believe that after isn't an ending at all, but the start of something new.